Hi, I'm Lisa, the artist behind Lachri Fine Art. Today I'm going to be doing a colored pencil tutorial for you of this eagle that I've done using Faber-Castell Polychromos. I just got these a few weeks ago. I've always used Prismacolor in the past. After using these, I'm totally in love. We're getting married. With the Faber-Castells, I was pretty happy to find that I could still blend great. They work well with the paint thinner like I use so often when I blend. And it is a harder pencil, which means it's going to hold its fine point better. So it made getting lots of teeny tiny detail really easy compared to using the Prismas. Now the Prismacolors can be used in combination with the Faber-Castells, so I probably will do pieces in the future where I'm still using the Prismas for different colors or different like soft backgrounds and that sort of thing. With the Faber-Castells, I found that I had to put on quite a few more layers, which actually worked to where I had more control, so I kind of like that. But when I did my background, I must have done it in 5 layers or so. In the video, you're only going to see, I think, 2 of those layers in progress, but I ended up putting about 5 or 6 coats to get my background where I wanted it. When I get to the detail around the beak, there are a lot of these fine, teeny tiny little hairs back here between the eyes and the beak that there is no way I would have gotten my Prismas to keep or hold such a fine point to get that sort of detail. So that was pretty cool for me because you guys know I love detail. I do plan on doing a demonstration sometime in the near future where I'm really showing the difference of both the Prismas and the Polychromos in use. I completed this piece using Strathmore Vellum paper. I honestly don't think that the vellum is the best choice for the Faber-Castell because the Faber-Castells really are a harder lead, and with the vellum, it's very soft, so it's so easy to indent that paper, which can be a bit of a problem if you're indenting it where you don't want it. So I am going to try some different papers and see how I like those, but for this one I did use the vellum. I have new painting and drawing videos every Wednesday, so make sure you subscribe and follow me on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all those fun social media sites, links below in the video description, to keep up with my newest work. Being that this was my first time using these, I applied my layers pretty light to start with. Now that I've used them a bit more, I realize I could have gone heavier and gotten the same effect that I was going for quite a bit quicker. On this background, I ended up doing about 5 or 6 layers to get the look that I wanted. They blended out beautifully with the Mona Lisa odorless paint thinner like I've always used on the Prismacolors. I normally like to get my backgrounds done first because it makes it easier for me to judge the values of my subject. Personally, when I start with a subject, I always end up going way too light and have to go back and hype up my contrast after the background is in. I blended out my first layer with paint thinner and then went back over it again with the pencils. This photo shows the 2 brushes that I used for blending out this piece. The smaller flat brush I used for finer detail areas and the filbert on the larger zones. I realized one of the best things about these pencils after getting my first layer of background in. They really last. If I had done the same amount of work in Prismas, I would have eaten through quite a bit of pencil, not even counting how much extra sharpening I would have had to do every time the wood casing split. I might still be bitter about that. I kept looking at my pencils thinking, how is this possible that it doesn't need to be sharpened yet? I was getting more coverage with these pencils than I ever did with my Prismas, not to mention that never once did a lead break. And when I did sharpen them, no splitting of the wood casings at all. I'm pretty excited about that still. Onto the beak, I started by layering down my white in the light areas. Look how nice and pointy the tip of those pencils are. Seriously, I'm so excited about this. After layering down the white, I started to build up the details with my darker colors. I like to break up the areas I'm working on into sections. In this case, only working on the gray of the tip of the beak until it's nearly finished, then the yellow, and then inside the mouth. My reference photo for this guy was from the Birds of Prey royalty-free reference CD for artists that I purchased from Jason Morgan. This is one of his best reference photo CDs yet. I may be partial because I like birds so much. There are so many great photos to work from, all really high quality so you can see all of the details. The link to his website, if you want to check that out, is below in my video description. Next, I start blocking in the eye. These nice pointy pencils came in handy for that detail. I have a shadow in the upper section of the eye, followed by my highlight. The lightest portion of the iris is the bottom of the eye. Onto the feathers around the face. This guy had a lot of little black hairs in between his eye and his beak, so I layered those in first, paying close attention to the direction that those little hairs should go in. And I also blocked in some of the small feathers around the eye and the top of the head. I really can't stress enough the importance of paying attention to which direction these feathers lay. Once I got the darker blacks in, I start building up my colors with a goldish brown shade along with different tones of warm gray. At this point, I'm working around the entire head, slowly building up my detail and colors. When I have everything generally blocked in, I move on to the feathers on the neck. Like the rest of the bird, I'm layering in everything fairly light to start with, and I'll go back over it as I build up my colors. All of the feathers on the back of the neck are heavily outlined, so I did that first to keep my place. Then I went inside of all of them with varying shades of gray and brown. Now I'm going back in between some of these feathers with black to create slight shadows which make the feathers look more three-dimensional. Without these shadows, they look too flat. Moving on to the back, I've started by blocking in where some of my darker areas will be first, again outlining my feathers. The difference is now many of these feathers are bordered by a light cream color, so my outlines are actually the shadow underneath each upper feather. When those are outlined, I go back and start blocking in the paler grays before I start building up the richer browns. If you pause this video at any time, notice how nice and sharp these pencils stay. When I do sharpen them, they are so easy to get a fine point without breaking. If you go back and watch any of my Prismacolor videos, you'll notice that most of my pencils are pretty blunt. I avoided sharpening those as much as possible because of how badly they had a tendency to break and split. At least my newer ones did. My older ones from about 15 years ago weren't so bad. You'll notice as I move along, I'll keep going back to areas I had previously done and build up my richer browns more. While I nearly finish an area before moving on, I always go back and build up more contrast as I get other areas in. It can be difficult to correctly judge your values when you're working up against white paper. Once the surrounding colors are in, it's much more obvious what is needed. Onto the larger feathers on the wings, again I started by outlining them with the darker brown. I then go back in with the lighter shades. I had a lot of fun with this section. There are so many shades of orange, cream, browns, and grays to layer in. I started with a medium shade of brown. Then I went back in and started really hyping up my shadows with a darker warm gray and brown. At this point, everything is fairly flat. To achieve more texture, I go back in with black and start building up the shadows between the feathers. Another thing that I found that I love about these Faber-Castell Polychromos pencils is how nicely the white and creams layer on top of some of my darker areas. Not fighting a wax buildup, they stick to the other colors under them quite nicely. I was really happy about that when building up the details on these feathers. continue building up my black and dark gray areas, as well as some of my richer browns and oranges. I also add white and cream to pull out some of the highlights and better define some of my feather edges. And that finishes up this colored pencil piece. I can say I am extremely happy with my jump to the Polychromos pencils. I still like the look of Prismas, but overall, these are not my favorite for sure.